Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Yasir Abbasi. I'm a consultant psychiatrist in addiction and also a professor of psychiatry at Liverpool John Moores University. I've been invited by Creative Minds Media, CMM, to do a talk about adverse childhood events for a group of attendees over here. We thought it would be a very important topic to talk about because a lot of mental health problems, psychological issues all stem from childhood. And if we are able to prevent these traumas happening to children as they're growing up, we might be able to prevent future mental health problems. So I look to a very interactive session and hopefully have a very engaging debate after the talk. Thank you for inviting me and wish you all the best.
Thank you, Dr. Saab. Just a little bit in Urdu, just to explain to our viewers. The adverse childhood events, what are these? क्या होता है कि divorce, जैसे कोई parents की divorce हो जाती है, कोई abuse है child, so what kind of events you're referring to?
Adverse childhood events जो होते हैं वो कई किस्म के होते हैं, मेजर और माइनर. मेजर में डायरेक्ट अब्यूज़ होता है, फिजिकल, सेक्सुअल, साइकोलॉजिकल अब्यूज़. और इनडायरेक्ट एडवर्स चाइल्डहुड इवेंट्स ऐसे होते हैं जैसे आप किसी घर में रह रहे हैं, उसमें आप अपने पेरेंट्स को लड़ते हुए देख रहे हैं, डोमेस्टिक वायलेंस, या उस घर में कोई आदमी है या कोई पर्सन है उनको कोई मेंटल हेल्थ प्रॉब्लम है, या कोई ड्रग यूज़ करते हैं, या देयर इज़ अ लॉट ऑफ आर्ग्यूमेंट्स गोइंग ऑन अराउंड. इस किस्म के जो चीज़ें होती हैं उनको एडवर्स चाइल्डहुड इवेंट्स बोलते हैं, और इनके इम्पैक्ट होते हैं बच्चे के जहन पे जब वो बड़े हो रहे होते हैं, और ये इम्पैक्ट उनको उस वक्त अंदाज़ा नहीं होता. बड़े होके बाद में वो डिफरेंट बिहेवियरल प्रॉब्लम के साथ सामने आते हैं. तो व्हेन यू ट्रेस इट बैक तो आपको पता चलता है कि बचपन में कंसिस्टेंटली ये लोग इस किस्म के इवेंट्स एक्सपोज हुए थे.
Right, first of all, so thank you so much for coming to today's session. We're going to talk about adverse childhood events, and this session is now today is only number 19 as what we call it. So far, alhamdulillah, this is our 19th session over 2 years plus the other events, as you know. Firstly, so we would like to pray for our country कि वहाँ पे अमन हो, सलामती हो, और जो वो war condition में हम इस वक्त हैं, तो अल्लाह पाक जो रहम करे, and they should engage in dialogues, both countries, both governments, and जो भी होता है, जब भी war होती है, तो obviously the innocent civilians they lose their life, and obviously शुहदा जो है हमारे जो आर्मी है, उन जो war front पे जो है वो front line पे they're fighting, they're protecting our country and ourselves. उनके लिए बहुत सी दुआ कीजिए कि अल्लाह पाक सबको हमारे मुल्क को अपनी हिफाजत में रखे. उसी तरह से जो इंडिया है उनके भी जो सिविलियंस हैं और जो सबको हिफाजत है कि सब जगह में जो है वो पीस हो, अमन हो. और इसी तरीके से वहाँ पे गाज़ा में भी जहाँ पे इतने ऐसे से जो है वहाँ पे बहुत ज़्यादा जुल्म हो रहा है और तशद्दुद हो रहा है और जेनोसाइड हो रहा है, तो वो भी जो है comes to an end. And Ukraine and wherever the war is in the world, we would just want to pray for the peace and harmony for the whole world. Thank you so much. So I would not take long. I would like to invite Dr. Yasir Abbasi. Is a consultant psychiatrist and a lot more. Dr. Yasir will introduce himself. Mashallah, got a lot of other qualifications as well. And so please welcome Dr. Yasir Abbasi.
Thank you very much, Rosanna, for having me over. It's a pleasure talking for Creative Minds Media, and it's great to talk about mental health problems at an event like this, so that we all get a good kind of grounding and understanding of mental health problems of our life. So I'm going to mix up the lecture in Urdu and English, if that's all right with you guys.
Yes.
That was okay. Okay, great. And this is the best speaker I've seen. He's not short as a podium. Still making a lot of noise. So I'm going to start off talking about what we call adverse childhood events. Very timely so. Farzana over here talked about a few wars going on, and wars have an impact not only on adults, human beings, countries, societies, but in particular on children. These studies were more so in stable countries where you see impact of day-to-day trauma on children and how it impacts them when they grow up. I'm going to talk about 25, 30 minutes, and I'm going to whiz through a few slides. But we will focus on what trauma is, what types of trauma can impact people, and the types of problem it can create. A lot of people think that childhood trauma only creates mental health problems. बचपन में अगर आप you're exposed to trauma, आपको खुद पता नहीं होता कि you're a child. It can lead up to physical health problems as well when you grow up. But as we go along, we'll talk about it. Okay, so I always do this in my presentation. There is no declaration of interest. There is no money that has exchanged hands, and I have not been sponsored by anyone, so it's an independent lecture. I'm a consultant psychiatrist by background. I have expertise in general adult and addiction psychiatry, and I'm also a professor at Liverpool John Moores University, as a professor of psychiatry. So this is what is going to do. The trauma can be of multiple types. आप लोग सिर्फ सोचते हैं कि बचपन में बहुत major event होगा तो वही trauma होता है. One बाकी stuff is just you take it in your stride and you just move on. Trauma can be of any kind which impacts a child in a form that it impacts them thinking differently, impacts them in a way where they're able to regress back into themselves, and where you struggle to talk about it. Most probably you've gone through a traumatic event. And the fact that you weren't able to talk about it shows that you were worried about the trusting relationship between you and your caregivers. That in itself is traumatic. And again, you might think, why are we discussing of trauma in childhood? I mean, we live in a society where we are surrounded by our loved ones, our family, our friends, and we've got children around us. And this is really to make sure we're able to give our future generations the best kind of environment that we want to our children, our grandchildren, our friends, our families, and their children and their grandchildren, so that they are able to become a much more productive individual as they go along. So it's very easy to be exposed to different type of trauma. You have to have an event, then you have to have an experience of the event and the effect. Sometimes just watching things which are very traumatic can have an effect on you. So exposing our children, for example, to gruesome images that are coming out of war zones can be very traumatic for a child. The kind of meaning that they take from it is very difficult to ascertain, because they'll look at it and they'll decide what it means. They might not vocalize it, and they suppress those experiences, and then it comes out later to affect them. Don't worry about it. Let her make noise. It's part of the talk. Don't worry.
Thank you.
Yeah. So traumatic events could be any sort, but there is a set of criteria where they kind of look at major traumas and minor traumas, and I'll kind of highlight that to you in a minute and what it affects. But you have to have an event, an experience of the event, and a measurable effect on the child. For example, if you see parents fighting, shouting at each other very loudly, and the child is just observing, you're not being angry at the child, but the child goes away and hides under the table. That is an event. An experience of the event and the effect on the child, that the child hid under the table. Nothing major happened, but the child just was exposed to something that they've not been exposed to before. For them, a caregiver is a very important figure in their life. And anything that impacts them, impacts the caregivers, impacts the child as well. So you need to look after yourself, you need to look after your relationships, you need to look after the environment within the house before looking outside. So they generally, in studies, highlight 3 direct and 6 indirect experiences which have an impact on childhood development. When children are growing up, their brains are developing as well, almost to the age of 18. They have fully formed brains, but the nerves are further pruning up, they're further enhancing the neurocircuitry in the brain. So almost up to the age of 18, the nerves are pruning itself. So any kind of event, or even, people use drugs at a very young age, that can affect the development of the brain. So have to be careful as they're growing up that they're not exposed to traumas as they go along. Sometimes you can't help it, it happens, and that's why it's very important to sit down and talk to the child to see what their understanding of the event was. Saying the kind of things that we say to children, but these are very serious verbal abuse which can have serious impact. छोटी बहुत चीज़ें मजाक में, it's alright, but serious verbal abuse, physical abuse, which means being physically hit on a regular basis, and sexual abuse. You'd be surprised how commonly sexual abuse happens to a child at a young age, and usually majority of the sexual abuse that happens to a children is usually done by someone they know. It's not done by strangers. Therefore, you need to be constantly vigilant with your children, or people around you, or other people's children. Just be very vigilant as to what happens. So these are the three direct adverse experiences, and the indirect ones are parental separation or excessive domestic violence. If the child is exposed to either parent being physically aggressive to each other, mental illness, so if they see someone in the household who has mental illness, so the child doesn't have mental illness, but people around them, and they're living in the same household. If they see someone within the same household using drugs, if there's alcohol abuse within the same household where they're living, or there's incarceration, which means someone within the household is in prison. These are called indirect traumas. So these are the 6 indirect traumas, and the top are the 3 direct traumas, and the multiple forms of it. So let's break it down a little bit more. Okay, so I hope you can all see that. So environmental impact, in terms of the less obvious traumas that you can see. You have people living in socioeconomic situations where it's very difficult for them to cope. Constantly, abruptly changing schools or changing their environment if people are moving too much. If some of your brother or sister is really unwell for a prolonged period of time, someone, for example, in a household of 3 or 4 children, one child has got some serious illness and the parents are really involved with that child, the other child gets ignored. And it's a very difficult situation for the parents. They don't do it deliberately, but it happens. They themselves going through a serious type of illness, living with parents who are always fighting. And again, this is different to domestic violence, this is different to physical abuse, but parents who are always having an argument. An argument in a marital life is norm, right? If you don't have an argument with your spouse, then there's something wrong there. You're living together, you will have disagreements, you will have arguments. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not about that. It's about having these serious, high-pitched arguments on a regular basis, but also the fact that when you're having these arguments, you make sure the child is protected. You're not hurling abuse in front of the children. The husband is not hurling abuse towards the wife, or the wife doing it to the husband or the partners, whoever you want to kind of, no matter how the relationship is described. So you need to make sure you protect and shield the child. So if you're having disagreements and you think it's going to blow up, then you best do it in the confinements where the child is not exposed to it. And watching a parent hurt if they're in a serious accident and they've been exposed to seeing that. So again, emotional, traumatic experience could be, and again, these are less by anyone there. Being put down and shamed, body shamed, shamed because of their color, shamed because of their academic achievements, constantly being put to shame. It's not the best way to have a healthy environment. I come from the same background where we're very vigilant, where we want our children to do best. We want our children to perform academically. We want our children to become the best individual, most successful in every walk of life, and we all want that. But there are ways of making sure how you do that in a positive way, rather than putting down and saying, "Oh, you've scored horrible in your tests or your year-end exams. You're going to be a bin man." That's not the best way how to describe it. That's not the best way, in fact, to show them humanity. You're showing a bin man of a lesser human if you're kind of comparing them like that. However, you put targets to them, you want them to achieve, you need to push them to achieve, and you need to put the right type of pressure on them to make sure they achieve what they want to achieve. And being neglected or abandoned by someone you love. So neglect is both emotional neglect and physical neglect. Physical neglect is where you're not looking after their needs, you're not washing them up, you're not giving them meals, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. That's the physical neglect. But emotional neglect is you're not available to them emotionally. You're too occupied. So you're there, you're making sure the basic needs are met, but then you're too busy in your life to be actually available for them, to sit down and have a chat at the end of the day. One thing I always used to do, I have got 2 boys now, mashallah, one is 18 and he's got a big set of hair and it's constantly growing, and I want him to cut it but he doesn't want to. I don't know what to do. I'm trying not to be physically abusive. But he's 18 and 14, but when they were, I think until they were 12, at the end of the day when they used to go to bed at 8, I had a very clear bedtime. And I said, we go to bedtime, my wife would go to one, I would go to the other, we'd read a book, and in the end I'd say, well, do you want to summarize your day? And he'd just talk rubbish. I just listen. 5 minutes he'd talk about this and the other, or sometimes we'd say there's nothing. But sometimes that gives them the opportunity in a very nice environment. You're lying in bed with them and they kind of give you a summary of the day. And if they say something alarming, you just pick that up, don't alarm them, and then later on try to see how you best stress with them. But that's a good way of being available for them. So, that's a very good music.
I'm going to sing to that.
I'm going to sing to that. I don't know what song that is, but I'll still sing to it. Oh, you're right.
Special recorded.
So you're talking about stress, right? So there is positive stress there, which is good. Positive stress. There's an increase in heart rate, there's elevation of stress hormones, and that helps you perform. And you need to learn how to cope with that positive stress. Then it goes beyond a point where it's constantly there, it becomes somewhat tolerable. So if, I don't know, your parents have a bit of an argument and one walks away and that walks away, brief stress, possibly tolerable. But then if it's constantly there, then you go into a toxic state and you're in a prolonged activation of stress response system. So you're constantly, a lot of adrenaline, cortisol in your brain is being released because you're in that vigilant state. And then these children grow up to then become quite emotionally dysregulated and aggressive. So they think they're constantly in a toxic, heightened state. So anything you say to them, even a slight amount of criticism, they'll defend it as if you've kind of, offended them in one way or the other. So you need to understand these levels, and each person will have a different level. So what my positive stress would be might not be yours, or what your positive stress would be might not be mine. You might be able to tolerate more stress than I do. So every person would have an individual stress level. हर आदमी का अलग-अलग level होता है, and you have to understand that. आप ये नहीं बोल सकते कि हाँ मैं जब छोटा था तो I used to walk 10 miles to my school and I used to do this and I used to do that. But as I said, if it's constantly your child is going through chronic traumatic stress events, constantly people are fighting in the house, or there's drug use in the house, or they are constantly struggling to find the next meal, and they don't feel the parent is there to love them, is constantly giving them emotional abuse, then they remain in this heightened state where the nervous, hormonal, and immunological system gets infected. Your immunity gets affected by constant stress. The cortisol that is released impacts your immunity, and then they end up becoming unwell on a regular basis. If they are constantly exposed to trauma, sometimes you're driving and you cut off somebody, or you enter the road, and then this driver is going crazy and showing you all sorts of fingers and being aggressive towards you. Most probably as a child they've been exposed to trauma. That's why they're being so aggressive like that. Or maybe they have been attuned in a way to respond that way. They're also 11 times, that's a very high number, 11 times more likely to be incarcerated, which means that 11 times more likely to be involved with crime, be with the criminal justice system, and use heroin and crack. So drug use becomes more and more of an issue. And there's not much difference in gender, but however, which means people who are exposed to ACEs, both boys and girls, they grow up to have same type of problems. Women, if they're exposed to emotional or sexual abuse as children, have a higher risk of developing psychiatric symptoms. But
my parents don't understand. All the drinking and fighting means I'm scared. I'd like a cuddle, perhaps a bedtime story, but mostly I'd like them to stop shouting at me. And sometimes they hit me. Feeling scared every day and not feeling loved or wanted will change me for the rest of my life. Later, I'll have problems at school, problems with alcohol, and I'll get in trouble with the police. What's happening to me right now means I'm more likely to have serious health problems in middle age and die sooner than I should. Doctors say my life is full of adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. But in my world, this means I see my dad hitting my mum. Dad's got a drinking problem, and mum's always crying, even with the tablets. I'm always being shouted at and hit. After the booze and fags, there's not a lot of money for toys or clothes, or even food. I'm getting used to being scared all the time, now I'm just angry. The doctors say things are changing inside me. My brain isn't learning how to control my feelings properly. My body can't relax like those kids who don't have ACEs, so my body won't be able to repair itself properly when I get older, making it more likely I'll get cancer or heart disease as an adult. It hurts when my parents hit me, but the real damage is hidden, and that damage will be with me for life.
I drink and smoke. They say I'm out of control, but I'm not. It's just my way of coping with my ACEs. I've been in plenty of fights, but what's wrong with that? Kids' punches don't hurt half as much as when my dad hits me. I beat up a kid last week at school because he looked at me weird. Who cares? I ended up with more time out of school. Learning's not for me anyway, and the teachers don't care any more than my parents. I don't like the way anyone looks at me except my girl. She's 16 and pregnant, just like my mum was with me.
So this is where I've ended up. I've got diabetes and cancer's probably on the way. I know these kill you, but I could do without them. I've never had a proper job and I've spent time inside. I hate my kids. I hate my mum too, until she left, so the kids have grown up with ACEs. And now my daughter had her first kid. She's 16. The course of my life was set in the wrong direction a long time ago. I know where I'm heading, and sadly I know where my kids are heading too. This doesn't have to happen. A little help in childhood makes a big difference to where life takes you. When I was a baby, the nurses noticed that my mum wasn't coping and helped her and explained how important my childhood is to the rest of my life. So, with a bit of help, she coped. The police came round after next door complained about the noise from mum and dad fighting. They asked how I was feeling. I told them I was scared all the time. Mum and dad got help. The shouting got better and the hitting stopped. I even got some bedtime stories. I still had problems at school, but the teacher asked me about what was happening at home. I got help controlling my feelings. It wasn't a lot, but it was enough. I'm now married with 2 children, and I've got a job. Most of the time. I haven't repeated the same problems with my kids. We got help when being a parent got too much. Our children are ACE-free, and that means their kids stand a good chance of growing up ACE-free as well. Almost half the people in England and Wales experienced 1 ACE as a child, and 1 in 10 of us suffered 4 or more ACEs. If we stop ACEs, millions of children will not become smokers or binge drinkers, and levels of violence in adults will be cut in half. Fewer ACEs in childhood also means fewer adults developing diseases like cancer, heart disease and diabetes in middle age. We all need to be ACE aware. Are you? Doctors, police, nurses, teachers, firefighters, and most importantly, parents. The more you know about ACEs, the more you can help stop children with ACEs in their lives. And for those of you who have already suffered ACEs, the more you know, the more you can help yourself.
The ACEs continue, you carry them with you. It's also called, intergenerational trauma. You carry it with you, your parents would have carried it with them, and their parents would have carried it with them. And it just goes on and on and on until you try and break that cycle. And if you are aware of certain behaviors that you have, or you feel you've been exposed to trauma, then you need to kind of learn how to change it. But these are the things that you can have a look and see. I mean, these are what we call positive childhood events. There are 7 there. And, they balance out some minor negative childhood events. I mean, actually, if there's intense physical abuse, emotional abuse, or sexual abuse, these things won't be able to counter that. Those trauma needs to stop. But if there are minor traumas where they've been exposed to emotional unavailability or seeing constant domestic argument, these kind of things would help. The ability to talk with the family about feeling. If you feel the child can talk to you, that's great. The sense that family is supportive during difficult times. Don't panic when they come to you with a problem. Try and listen, try and solve. You might be panicking inside, and that's fine. I always panic as a parent. But be supportive. In the enjoyment of participation in community traditions. That's such an important thing. It's kind of part and parcel of every community, whichever community you belong to. There are certain community traditions. You get them part of it. Make them feel that they're part of a community. Make them feel they're part of a society. A sense of belonging in high school. If the child is really struggling in a high school, then most probably that school is not for them. Having supportive friends, it's not that easy nowadays, but having supportive friends is very useful. And having parents or a parent who's very generally caring and feeling protected by an adult at home, so you're there to help them. I mean, we always tend to, and I've always seen this in my household, whenever family friends used to come over, my parents used to tell me off more. I'm not sure why. Something triggered in them. And or someone would say something, then I say, yeah, tomorrow guilty. So we need to be protective of our children, make sure, I mean, we don't need to spoil them and make them into someone who don't understand and have insight. But again, there are ways that say, well, we can have this discussion later on. Can you please move from here now? And children do respond to that. And again, we live in a very secular society, so religion doesn't really always play a role. But for those where religion plays a role, it's very important to understand that it has a healing element as well. Sometimes we make it very traumatic by imposing religious rituals on people, and that can be very, very traumatic. I've known, I cannot tell you how many, particularly female, have been parents or young girls who've now become adults have approached mental health services because they used to go to someone to study, religious studies, and they had very bad experiences there. So again, make sure you're not imposing the understanding of your culture or your religion in a very imposing and traumatic way. Make sure they understand, have a debate, an open debate, so that it's a two-way discussion, and they take it in a very positive way. So it's not imposition, but they understand that being compassionate is part of the religion. So whatever religion people follow, if you look at Islam, I think we've always seen that we always say that God or Allah is more compassionate, is 1,000 more compassionate to you than your mother. So compassion is very important in your relationship with your children, in your relationship with people around you. So just again, I thought it would be very important. Again, there are therapies out there that people can access. The many therapies, different therapies do different things. A lot of people say, I'm having counseling, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. That's a very late term. There are a number of different types of psychological therapies, and it depends what actually you're experiencing to see what kind of therapy would be useful for you. There's no one size fits all, so there's no single advice that can be given to all. One thing that I always tell people is take out time for yourself and make sure there is within those 24 hours in a day a point where you sit down and unwind. It's very important for you to unwind, whether you do it for 5 minutes or you do it for half an hour. But look after yourself. Physical activity is also absolutely essential to help people feel psychologically and physically well. Physical activity could simply mean walking for 30 minutes, but doing it on a regular basis. Oh yes, so this is a trauma that our children are being exposed to excessively nowadays. We're not, or we are as well, but we escaped it when we were children. Social media. Right?
Tell us about it.
It's a different talk, and I can do a 2-hour talk on social media, but you can see how disturbing your smartphones can be. This is a screenshot from someone who's had notifications. So you can see they've had about 657 notifications in 7 days, 90 notifications per day. And this was a person who was trying to avoid using smartphones. So you can imagine the amount of notifications you get on your phone and how distracting that is. And we've all got attention fragmentation. We are finding it difficult to focus nowadays. But our children are constantly being exposed to this. We don't know. On social media, they're constantly being exposed to being perfect, trying to compete with something which is not real. So this is what I call the Insta hit, right? These are pictures of 2 girls out there. They almost look somewhat similar, but you can see they're kind of really made up. But you can see how they've altered their image. This is what got up there on social media. And this is the reality. So you can see how they're constantly having body image issues by trying to show themselves as something that they're not. And there's a huge amount of pressure out there for young teenagers to cope with this, to cope with likes and dislikes. So yes, I mean, I'm not going to go into these details, but the trauma that we talked about were trauma that they actually see and face, but now they're facing all the trauma on smartphones. You don't have to be bullied in school, you can be bullied on social media as well. How many of you have seen a series called Adolescence on Netflix? Hey? Okay. It hits you really hard. And you know the last episode where the father talks about teddy bear, I mean, it evoked so many emotions in me I didn't even know existed. It's a very hard-hitting drama, and that shows how you don't know what's happened in a normal household, a reasonably normal household.
You couldn't believe that boy.
You couldn't believe what actually happened.
Looking at him, you couldn't believe it.
And then you don't know what's happening behind closed doors.
But they didn't show much, did they, what was happening behind?
Deliberately.
There's a second part, I think.
Possibly. But deliberately they didn't. They wanted you to see and understand that your child could be exposed to anything, you know. They talk about something called toxic masculinity, that kind of being exposed to social media influencers who are saying of how to be a man and this is what you need to do and that is what you need to do. All these kind of comparisons where there's constant body image comparison, or being bullied online and you're arguing back, and they have a different language out there, a language that you and I don't understand. You know, even the emojis have different meaning. You think some of the heart means something else. It's bizarre, it's impossible catching up to that, man. So what can you can't control social media, you can't control their access to smartphones completely, you can't ban smartphones because they're essential nowadays. You can have timings to it. I mean, my son's still 18, he would never take his phone in his room at night. So 10 o'clock, the phone is in my room to be charged. They always get charged in my room. They don't have it at night. Never leave phone with your children overnight. Never ever. And make sure there are timings. You don't have to have constant access to the phone. They come back from school, they give you the phone. And then you only give it back to them for half an hour to an hour. However, you can't control everything. But what can you do? What can you control? You can control your relationship with your children. So you sit down and have an open, candid, trusting discussion with them. And they might come up with something and chat with you. So yeah, that is the end. But I thought I'll kind of introduce adverse childhood events to you, a bit of our impacts of us as adults. But there's so much that we can talk about mental health. I mean, there's so much that can be discussed. But again, I guess we'll have Q&A and then we'll see what you want to discuss. We can discuss this further, or we can have linked discussions. Up to you. Well, thank you very much for listening, and thank you for being bored.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you very much. That was really heart-wrenching, really, to see that video.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, I mean, obviously that's representation of the society here and people here. In our time, when we were kids, we went through a similar situation. And we had a joint system, we had nana, dada, dadi, chachu, all these relations. And when our parents had an issue, then we had all these caregivers to take us away and distract us from what we would be thinking about as kids do here, because they have no one else except their parents. So I think the breakdown in that kind of scenario has made our children of this generation suffer a lot more. And as you mentioned rightfully so, we need to bring in the community spirit, we need to bring in these family functions, because they allow children to find other ways of being distracted and being spoken to by their relatives. अपने जो रिश्तेदार हैं, खाला, चाची, ये जो रिश्तेदार आपसे जब बात करते हैं, जी बिल्कुल. Anyone who can take that child away from the thoughts of the toxicity they're going through. So I think a lot of things needs to be done, और I'm sure कि ये जो community है ये इस तरह की बहुत सी चीज़ें इस नज़रिए से करते हैं कि we provide our children these events ताकि हम उनको इनसे ये जो adverse trauma इसको avoid कर सकें. But as you say, I mean,
2 points. So the first point was joint family. I mean, joint family naturally has its benefits, as you said. There are other adults around who the child can talk to, who you can rely on for support. Nowadays, parents are running from one corner to the other, trying to do school drops and this drop and sports drop, and they're tired. At the end of the day, they're exhausted. And when you have a joint family system, sometimes that helps. But it has its drawbacks as well, where you are felt that there are different expectations, there are different pressures, and there are different pressures on women in a joint family system. So there has to be a nice balance. However, that does not mean that you don't have access to these caregiving relatives.
One thing that I would like to ask is, there's a saying in Urdu which we've heard since I was a child. खिलाओ सोने का निवाला देखो शेर की आँख से. Do you agree with this? Because truly speaking, I don't. मुझे लगता है कि इसका क्या ये मतलब है कि उसने बच्चे ने किसी भी चीज़ का हाथ रखा और आपने उसको दिला दिया. Like if my kid asks me for something, I can think, okay, just make a list and give me that list on Eid and I'll get it for you. लेकिन मैंने I've seen a few parents के जो मांगा वो दिला दिया और उसके बाद बच्चे को ताने देना शुरू कि हमें तो ये कभी लेना नहीं था. और रास दिन के क्यों करते हो ये, क्यों बच्चे को 200 pounds का टॉय दिलाया, यार हमें बचपन में नहीं मिला था. So this is how they treat themselves probably. ये क्या सही अप्रोच है? ये कहावत सही लगती है आपको?
There are family dynamics everywhere, and each family has a very different way of addressing and dealing things. I personally feel you need to have a balanced approach. As parents, you need to have a very open, friendly relationship with your children, but they need to also understand that you're not their friends, you're their parents. So there need to be boundaries. So people or children who do not have boundaries, then they find it difficult for themselves to then control their needs and requirements later on. If they get instant gratification, agar aapko kuch chahiye wo fauran mil gaya, that means you're instantly gratified. And you expect this to happen on a regular basis. And if you don't, then you start having a breakdown. So they need to sit down and understand. You need to level up what you can do and what you can't. Bale bachpan mein milo na milo, but you need to level up what is necessary, what is unnecessary, and then make your own decisions within your household whether if it is important or not. But that making a list is brilliant. You know, a lot of, for example, going on that example, my children when they were young used to come back and say, "Oh, why don't we celebrate Christmas?" I said, "Because we don't." And we kind of had a discussion and said, "Oh, but they get so many gifts." And I said, "Well, how do they get the gifts? There's Santa gives them the gifts." I said, "All right, fine." I did the exact same thing. Give me a list, and on Eid day, you will get a gift. But there'll be no Santa there. There'll be a Babaji.
Yeah, I was trying to say is that they don't have the same issues that we had in our childhood. उनके issues ही अलग हैं. Sometimes the point is that we are treating ourselves. हमें मतलब मुझे बचपन में ये खाने को नहीं मिला.
You are addressing your guilt.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
don't try and. So I always say two things. Don't try and live your life through your children. They're very different people. They're very different personalities. They're different characters. They're not an extension of Dr. Yasir Abbasi. My son, I wanted him to be a doctor like all doctor parents, but my son decided not to be a doctor, and I've come to peace with that. But that's fine. That he's a person of his own making and his own desires. So you're right. When sometimes we're satisfying our own guilt. And you might feel bad about it, but then you have to also kind of balance out as to what impact will that have on the child. Not only forget the price, even for example, my son I'll stop giving example of my family, but if a child wants an app, and it costs you only £2, and you can get them and it's fine, but just downloading the app and what the app is about, what impact will that have on the child? You need to evaluate that as well. So if you're trying to get them, I don't know, £250 worth of trainers, Air Jordans or something, then evaluate. And sometimes I've even gone to the point where I say, all right, fine, I'll buy you. I'll put in £60 or £80, you save up the rest. And then they then find the value of it. कहते हैं हज़रत अली कहते हैं बच्चे को when they're 0 to 7, love them immensely. When they're 7 to 14, be strict with them. When they're 14 and above, be their friend. So I think it follows the same thing. Sone karne wala means just look after your child, be loving, rather than you buy everything for them. Be loving. Being emotionally available is more than a material stuff that you give them. And कहते हैं शेर की नज़र lion stare, that's more about putting in boundaries. So it's how you interpret it.
But most of the time, I think
उसको different to school.
most of the time it becomes a jalad ki nazar.
Is that affect children these days, and I watched Adolescence, and it was truly shocking. And I think if you're a parent here with teenage children, you must watch it. Basically, the story is about, I think, a 13-year-old boy who ends up murdering a girl who he likes at school. And no one can believe that this very innocent-looking, cute-looking 13-year-old boy has murdered a girl in the school. And it talks about influencers like Andrew Tate. And I don't know how many of you in this room have heard of Andrew Tate and his link with Islam and what he says about women and how young people should treat women and the link with Islam especially is really worrying. And I think
he claims to be a Muslim.
Sorry?
He claims that he's reverted to Islam.
Well,
I know exactly.
I think so, yeah.
Exactly. But he has very misogynistic, very archaic views, absolutely.
And the teachers here in this country are very, very worried because a lot of the young boys, especially in schools, in secondary schools, are repeating what he said about women, and they think they can treat women basically as they want to. And I just think that our parents and members of our community are not aware of all these highly pressurizing external influences that occur outside, and a lot of parents don't know what's going on. I mean, over the last sort of 3 decades, I've covered stories about sexual abuse within Asian families, which people find shocking. We've all heard about the grooming gangs. And a few weeks ago, somebody said to me, "Oh, is this grooming still going on?" And I thought, well, where have you been living for the last, year or so? And this was just before there were some more cases that came up, I think, in Oldham and Rochdale just a few weeks ago. And I think our community has a tendency to be in denial about certain things. And I just think that people need to be more aware of what's happening in our community. And, like you said, in terms of reform, the politics, even though the political party is run by a Muslim. I don't know if you know, but Zia Yusuf has a very senior role in the Reform Party, and he's a Muslim. So I think people need to make themselves aware of all these issues and current affairs that are going on at the moment in the community and how they might adversely affect their families, really.
In 80% of the cases, it's someone you know. So it happens from within the circle of the family and friends. And particularly women and young girls are very, very vulnerable. And if we don't raise it up as a community, then we're doing a disservice to our children, to our future generations. So it's very, very important for us to make sure that people are aware, that people and children, girls are aware that if such a thing happens, it's not their fault. Because it's always, as someone like Andrew Tate would do, blame the women for the problem. So they think it's because of them that's happened, and they need to understand it's not their fault. They need to come and talk to someone.
At the age of 12, she said she wants to make a documentary basically, and she's working on this and she spoke to me about it. But at the age of 12, she said the police came to her and they said the CPS are saying, do you want to prosecute your father? She said at 12 years old, I was a child. I didn't have the mental capacity to make that decision. But now, then she talked about how she decided to leave the house at a young age, I think 18, she got married. She now has 3 grown-up children. I think she's only in her sort of early 40s. So you can see how her life has changed, and she wants to document all this in a TV documentary. But basically, she was talking about how the abuse came from her father, and she said, it's not just me, I've spoken since to other women who've had similar experiences within the Muslim community, and nobody talks about it. And she said what's worrying for her is that her father may have then gone on to abuse a lot of other
vulnerable individuals.
Yeah.
And again, there's this strong element of shame, isn't there? You're going to bring shame to your community. It's not about shame, it's about making sure people are protected. I think the other point I wanted to kind of touch on was about the grooming gangs. And again, it does exist, and it's something that we as a community strongly condemn. We need to make sure it doesn't happen on our watch. We need to protect all vulnerable people. But also we need to make sure our children are prepared for this, because you have a section of the media trying to portray it as a British or as a Pakistani problem, where it isn't. It happens across all communities and all fragments of the society. What you need to know is, as a community, we now take a pledge to try and identify it and make sure we do not let it happen within our community. We need to protect all that kind of young children who are impacted by that. So that's what we need to do as a society.
But the reason why it's referred to as Pakistani grooming gangs is because originally when this story broke, like 12, 15 years ago, the media was saying it was Asian grooming gangs. And then a delegation of senior members of the Indian community went to see the Director General at the BBC, and they may have gone to see other heads of other media organisations, and they said, look, you are tainting the whole of the Asian community with this problem, and it's not the whole of the Asian community. It's mainly Pakistani heritage people. And at that time, I looked into the figures, and if you look at the actual cases of people who are prosecuted, the majority of the men who are prosecuted are actually Kashmiri, Mirpuri. Certainly in the Rochdale case, because I went to Rochdale to speak to people, and people said to me, look, why are we being tainted? We're Pakistani, but it isn't us. If you look at the individual cases, all these men belong to generally Kashmiri, Mirpuri families. So why are you not saying Kashmiri? And we know why we're not saying Kashmiri or Mirpuri, because a lot of the political leaders in this country, a lot of the councillors are all affiliated to those groups, basically. So this is why now it's become a Pakistani grooming gang, and why it's referred to in the media, because the Indian community went and complained and said it's not our problem, it's somebody else's.
But I guess you work with layer it then becomes a problem for them only. I think because again, if you look at the grooming gang issue, a lot of white British people are involved in this as well. So it's a problem that is pervasive within the society, which needs to be addressed.
अपनी ज़बान नहीं आती, उर्दू नहीं आती, कई बातें ना ऐसी कह देते हैं, उस वक्त हमारे बच्चे सुन लेते हैं, तो उसके बाद कभी शिकायत करने की कोशिश करते हैं पेरेंट्स पे। मेरे साथ ऐसा हुआ कि मेरी बेटी ने मुझे शिकायत करने की कोशिश की कि मुझे किसी ने ऐसे कहा, वहाँ बहुत सारे लोग थे, तो मैंने उसकी बात नहीं सुनी, उस वक्त नहीं सुनी, तो पता नहीं 16 ईयर के बाद उसने मुझे वो बात बताई कि मैं आपको बताना चाहती थी, लेकिन ऐसा उस वक्त आपने मेरी बात नहीं सुनी थी, ये बात हुई थी। अब समझ नहीं आती, जिसने ये बात कही थी वो भाई कोई होता है, किसी का कोई अंकल होता है, किसी का कोई बहन होती है, या कोई ना कोई ऐसा रिश्ता होता है, तो परेशानी होती है, लेकिन उनको तरीके से कहो भी तो उन लोगों को समझ नहीं आती। लेकिन बच्चे के दिल में ना वो बात थी कि मेरी मदर ने उस वक्त मेरी बात नहीं सुनी। ऐसे जब कुछ होता है तो हम क्या करें?
देखिए, आप जो है ना, यू कांट कंट्रोल, आप लोगों को, आप दुनिया में हर आदमी को कंट्रोल नहीं कर सकते, तो पीपल विल से थिंग्स टू योर चिल्ड्रन, भले आपके फ्रेंड्स और फैमिली हो, ऑन द लैंग्वेज, ऑन द पेरेंट्स पे चीज़ें बोलते हैं, तो देयर विल बी पीपल हु विल से थिंग्स। Language is an issue, and actually, can you see कि आपकी बेटी, she had it in her for 16 years. उसके बाद इसको कितना impact होगा उस वक्त उसको कि she remembered 16 years later to sit down and talk to you. So I think the important thing is what I was saying earlier. You need to make sure that you develop that kind of relationship where they feel necessary to come and tell you. And once you've clocked in, it's not necessary कि उसके बाद एक drama create करे कि ऐसा क्यों और तुमने क्यों बोल दिया. But they're able to talk to you, so that was good of her. But then you kind of sit down and talk to them and then explain to them at that point in time why would someone say this like this, or why you should be confident about yourself. It doesn't matter what language you speak, what doesn't matter whether you know this or not. You should be a confident person. Don't worry, I trust you. They're more important, they're more interested in your trust in them rather than a random relative saying कि आपको दुनिया आती।
जी, मैंने अपनी बेटी को बहुत समझाने की कोशिश की, उसको समझाया कि उस वक्त की जो सिचुएशन थी वो कुछ और थी, मैं सॉरी हूँ बेटा, लेकिन मैं आप पे यकीन करती हूँ, आप ऐसे हो, लेकिन फिर भी ना कहीं उसके ज़हन में वो बात होती है, आपने उस वक्त नहीं सुना था।
That's how important it is that the child felt unlistened. And how it's a minor thing. देखा जाए in the grand scheme of things, it's not a huge issue. It's a very minor thing. However, the fact that she was unlistened and didn't pay attention, still. But naturally, I mean, it was 16 years ago. You can't undo it. उसको undo तो नहीं कर सकती. You explain what you have explained, and I'm sure she was absorbed it. बार-बार निकालते रहे तो उनकी मर्जी है।
अब मुझे हमेशा कहती है कि जब हम कुछ कहें ना तो हमारी बात सुन लिया। मैं बहुत सुनती हूँ। उस वक्त पता भी नहीं था, सही हम लोगों ने ना पेरेंटिंग सीखी नहीं हुई।
Intergenerational elements. You learn from your parents and they learn from their parents and so on and so on. It keeps on going on and on and on and on. But you are now more aware now.
अब मुझे वो पता ये भी कहती है कि मैं समझ सकती हूँ कि आप छोटे थे तो आपको पेरेंटिंग नहीं आती, नहीं आती, आप छोटे थे।
अब वो आपको ट्रॉमाटाइज करिए। Right, okay, sorry.
Another thing I just want to raise is the issue of the gaming nowadays.
Oh yes.
You know, it's not just our community, even the Goras, everybody. You know, those I just noticed my grandchildren come to my house and you know the game. I don't know the name of the way. Something Robo something.
Minecraft.
Yes.
Roblox.
It's so many bad things in there. Honest to God, I've just noticed, and I told my kids, this is the, you know, this is another thing that kids are getting spoiled. When they come from back to school, the parents give them a mobile or a laptop or iPad to keep them busy. In our days, we just go out, do cycling, climbing, whatever. But now there's no outdoor games for them. And this is giving a very bad impact on the kid's child. You know, it was once or twice that they're assassinating, they're doing kissing, they're raping. These type of games, you know, if you notice, and but parents don't care about these things.
You answered it. This is the reality.
So matter of fact, they're taking, it just on their minds.
Yeah.
And the thing
But this is
the
there.
life actually.
You can't take it away.
Yeah, that's true.
You can't hide them. You can't lock them in a room. This is there. So what you need to do is you need to make sure you have, again, these are the boundaries that you put in.
That's exactly.
So Fortnite, Roblox, and Minecraft, and all these games are out there. But as you say, what I've seen is parents from a very young age, 2 years of age. I've seen when they go out to eat, they give an iPad to the child, and they're busy with the iPad. And they're doing this all their lives, and then when they become 8-year-olds, suddenly they're playing gaming, and the parents are worried about how can we stop it. You can't stop it then.
And now,
It's too
I
late.
notice, my grandsons, if we take the mobiles, they come on Friday to my house. If I take their mobiles, I put their mobiles on, he's like...
He's shaking, he's
oh
having
my
withdrawal.
God, something is missing, and I always shout at them. I say,
Yeah.
no, this is the time to sit, we all here together to chat and play games and think, but I don't know this is what actually they're getting in their minds. And so many things, even my 6-year-old grandson, he's doing so funny things that nobody does in the house. Even the parents, I said, stop giving them a mobile. He's learning from with the games and everything. So,
And again, you need to organize the
but even the parents are not strict nowadays.
So
There's children show tantrum, lying on the floor and say, oh, Jan chodavar de do.
I know.
That's
So
what
that's why I never use the word strict. You see, I don't want parents to be strict. What I want the parents to be is engaging. You engage the child.
Yes.
From morning till evening, you engage them. When you have a free time, you take them out. You go to the parks. You go and do activities. You engage them regularly, and they will reciprocate. The moment you get busy in your own stuff, so you'll be surprised. There's been a study on this. The WHO now classifies gaming problem as a gaming disorder. It's a gaming addiction. But they've classified and seen the parents are also spending more time on the phone than the children. So the parents need to then unlearn how to use the phone.
डॉक्टर साहब आजकल जो पेरेंट्स हैं वो बच्चों को बिल्कुल मना नहीं करते जो वो मर्जी नहीं करते मेरे है ना नीसीज नेफ्यूज उनके बच्चे जो मर्जी करे जाए
देखिए अब हम लोग के दिमाग में जो फ्रेमवर्क है जिस पे हम मना करते हैं इट्स अ डिफरेंट फ्रेमवर्क आजकल द चिल्ड्रन मैं जैसे आपको बोलूँ कंटेम्प्रेरी इश्यूज द न्यू इश्यूज जो लेटेस्ट चीज़ें जिसमें बच्चे इन्वॉल्व होते हैं वेरी डिफरेंट अब आप उनको बैठ के जियो न्यूज़ बैठ के दिखाएंगे तो दे विल नेवर वॉच इट with you कि मेरे साथ एक्टिविटी करो और वो जियो न्यूज़ एंड हैव निहारी एंड फायर वॉच they won't do it ठीक है so you need to do activities that they like you need to go with them and do their activities not get them to do your activities ये बहुत important चीज़ है you can't stop them being distracted if you keep on imposing things which they're not interested in
डॉक्टर साहब मुझे इसकी ये रीज़न समझ आती है कि हमारी 18, 19, 20 साल में शादी होती थी अगले साल बच्चा आ जाता था खुद भी माँ भी बच्ची है बच्चा भी आ गया आजकल के जो पेरेंट हैं 30, 35 में शादी करते हैं उससे 5-6 साल के बाद वो बेबी लेते हैं तो वो तो तरसे में होते हैं पेरेंट उठ के लिए इसलिए बच्चा जो करे जाए बस करे उसको मना ही नहीं करना मैं तो इसकी ये रीज़न समझती हूँ
नहीं I've seen young parents do what you're saying young parents in their 20s वो बच्चों को जो करने देते हैं it's about parenting it's got nothing to do with age it's got nothing to do with decision when you have a child it's about parenting style dictates what you do और parenting style में आपको you have to engage the child I keep on repeating the same word if you don't engage the child won't be engaging with you remember this
क्या आप समझते हैं कि जो पेरेंट्स हैं एज एडल्ट्स वो उन्होंने ट्रॉमा चाइल्डहुड
most probably
like cycle repeats somebody has to break them
but you have to be aware that you're in that cycle you can't just break it because you think you have to know what your deficiencies are you have to know what your gaps are and then you change them
I was diagnosed diabetic.
Could it be another fact that parents don't have patience anymore, young parents? So for them, giving them like a tablet, phone, it's better than actually speaking to a child, find an easy way out.
You see, today, nowadays, what I feel
I don't think they have a lot of patience for years.
Do you think human beings have changed
Yeah.
over years?
We have a lot of patience, we
Yeah.
still do.
But the new parents
But
don't.
the new parents don't.
Why is that?
because they're so busy in this fast life. Life has changed so much that they're trying to compete with, like in job, in work, things like that. So they have a lot more to deal with outside. Our lives were very simple.
So our lifestyles were different.
Simple as
The
well.
lifestyles are very different now.
Very different now.
And the other thing is, we have this 24-hour connectedness.
Yeah.
Nowadays, in the last 10, 15 years, there's 24-hour connectedness. That constantly distracts you. 24-hour connectedness. Plus, lifestyles are very different to how you compare them. Even 20 years back. I remember 20 years back, I started my training as a junior doctor. Even that was very different to what it is now. So, lifestyles have changed. You can't undo those things. So, if you're busy in those things and that is the need of the hour, then you can decide what to prioritize or not to prioritize about it and be more organized. Rather than 24 hours on the phone or smartphones and TV and all that stuff.
I mean, you even see the moms, they'll give the tablet to the child while they're on the phone. They don't make time for their kids. They're too busy ringing friends abroad or wherever, and they're not spending quality time with the child. And they're not seeing what the child's watching on TV or on the tablet. They're just so busy with themselves.
And I've seen examples of young parents. I've seen examples of young parents who are spending quality time. So it's not about this generation losing patience, it's about each couple or each parent deciding on what they feel is important. But you're right, quality time is the key.
क्योंकि आई एम द यंगेस्ट तो मैंने नहीं देखा आपने मेरे भाइयों को कैसे पाला है। मेरी जनरेशन के लोगों का ये भी प्रॉब्लम है कि हमारे सामने एग्जांपल नहीं है। हम हमारे बच्चे इसी दौर में पैदा हुए हैं, यानी वो सोशल मीडिया के दौर में, गैजेट्स के दौर में। एंड मैं आई वुड से कि मैं ये करती हूँ कि हाँ बच्चों को मोबाइल दे दिया है, आईपैड दे दिया है, क्योंकि मेरे बच्चे बहुत डिफरेंट एज ग्रुप्स के हैं। मैं अगर बाहर लेके जाऊँ तो सबसे बड़ी 17 की है, उसको नहीं जाना है। ये बेबी है, ये 2 साल की है, इसको जाना है, फिर किसी को नहीं जाना है, फिर सबके इंटरेस्ट बिल्कुल अलग हैं, तो वो उनको एक साथ मिला नहीं सकते। एक का कर रहे हैं तो एक निगलेक्ट हो रहा है, एक का कर रहे हैं तो एक निगलेक्ट हो रहा है। तो हम एग्जांपल किस चीज़ की लें अपने बच्चों की बाउंड्री सेट करने के लिए या उनको उस तरह से कंट्रोल करने के लिए कि वो उसको ऑकवर्ड भी फील ना करें और एक
Your parents, the type of parenting they did was different, very different.
Very different. Yeah.
And they, again, I keep on saying, they were in a different era. Never compare how they parented to your parenting style. Your children should never compare their parenting style to yours.
That's true.
But you're right, ये भी होता है that there's a lot of age gap and the interests are very different. And that's a very difficult situation. And actually the young child has a very, very different need compared to the older one. Naturally, I mean, that's what children do. And that is a healthy kind of relationship there. And hopefully as the child goes older and older, 17 and 18, they are going towards adulthood and they will be developing their own interests and they will be working on their own things that they will be interested in. You can't engage all of them together, and that's fine, you don't have to feel guilty about that. You then focus on one person at a time. On occasion, what I've seen some good healthy parents do is they would decide that, for example, one day I'll focus on this child, and on another day I'll focus on that child, and on another day I'll focus on the third child. So each child gets your undivided kind of input during the week. You can't do everything for everyone. Oh, Mr. Arif is here. Thank you. I feel like we need to give him a round of applause.
Yes, welcome Arif.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Saab, for a very informative, very useful session. And thank you to all of you for your participation and for your attendance. And we'll see you next month on the 10th of June for another session on a different topic again. And so, big round of applause for Dr. Saab. Thank you to my team. Rubina Raja, please come here. And Asiya ji, please come here so we can present a little token of thanks to Dr. Saab. And Nikosa, please come forward.
Yes, so great.
Thank